Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the meal and this beautiful day outside. We're in for a treat this afternoon because we have with us an expert. I call him an expert, and that's anybody who travels afar to come here is an expert. But we have the president and CEO of 3 credit unions, and let me go through them one by one. The first is Calcom Federal Credit Union, headquartered in Torrance, California. Second is Nikkei Credit Union, which is headquartered in Gardena, not too far from Torrance, for those of us that are familiar with California. And then lastly, Mattel Federal Credit Union, which is located in El Segundo, which is very close to the LAX, Los Angeles International Airport. In addition to serving these 3 credit unions, this individual is the chairman of the board of the California Credit Union League. He is the founder and chairman, as shown here, of the Southern California Credit Union Alliance. He's on the supervisory committee at Catalyst Corporate Federal Credit Union. In fact, Trevor is on the board there. And he is member emeritus of the CUNA Mutual Group Select Credit Union Council. He is a graduate of the Cal State University at Dominguez Hills with a bachelor's degree in finance. And he's also a graduate of the Western CUNA Management School, which is where I first met him several years ago when they celebrated their 50th anniversary. In addition to that, he's a member of the CEO, or he is a graduate of the CEO Institute for the Credit Union Executive Society. He's a speaker at various credit union related events, and the latest of which, by the way, is the CUNA Mutual Group Discovery Conference. So he has already taped his presentation. He is a panelist who's going to be speaking on the subject of strategies to sustain small credit union growth. And by the way, I wanted to leave you with a short story. Hopefully it won't cut into too much of his time, about how his sense of humor works. Because many of us know Yuji Takasa from Performance Trust. And Yuji has clients throughout the nation, but many of them, because of his ethnicity and because of his office in Honolulu, happen to be Asian Americans. So Yuji tells me that he's been doing business with John, and he said that when he first heard John's name, John Hernandez, he thought, oh, great, I'm going to be breaking away from the Asian, culture that I've been known to nurture. And he said, this is my first Hispanic CEO. And then when he finally meets John face to face, he was, I guess, disappointed in the fact that John is not Hispanic or Latino, but he is Filipino. His background is Filipino. And when he conveyed that to John, John said, well, I'm more disappointed because I thought that Yuji was a woman. So how about a nice Hawaii Credit Union welcome for John Hernandez?
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. Aloha.
Aloha.
Thank you for inviting me here at your CEO Network luncheon. I know I'm competing against the food that you're eating. I did see rice was served. I hope that'll still keep you awake during my presentation. There's a lot of things that I'm going to cover, and I'm going to try to make sure that I can cover all of them within the allotted time that I'm given. So talking to Dennis, he had asked me to share with you information about the shared CEO, but also to talk about collaboration. So some of the information that I'll be discussing and talking to you today is purely from my heart and what I believe in, and also the fact that it's what's going on in our industry. And so, in as much as sometimes we don't want to talk about it, it's the stuff that needs to be discussed. So, bear with me. I do look at my slides every so often, but I'm going to try to use it to try to guide me as I talk to you. I love photos, so there's going to be some photos in here. It helps me convey the message that I'm sending to you, but there's also a couple of videos. Let's make this interactive. If you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me during the presentation, but you can also wait until after I'm done. That's entirely up to you. You can write down your questions if you wish. I'm not going to use the mic. I think my voice is loud enough. I'm not tall enough, but my voice is loud enough. So if you can't see me, even if I was on the podium, it wouldn't matter. But hopefully you can hear me. If that's an issue, you can just do this and I can try to make sure I can speak louder. With that, I want to start off, I'm going to talk about sharing and collaborating. And the sizes of my credit union are relatively small for some of you. 26 million is the smallest one, and the other two are 66 million each. And I'll talk a little bit more about them. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the sharing part, and then we'll get to the collaborating part. So on the sharing part, or sharing and collaborating, why share or collaborate? Well, to me, you share or collaborate because you wanted to make sure that you can afford the products and services or personnel that you couldn't afford otherwise on your own, especially if you're a smaller credit union. And an example of that is maybe sharing a compliance officer, a marketing officer, or maybe looking into building a call center together, right? Most of the small credit union, a compliance officer and a marketing officer is a luxury we can't afford. And a call center is, we all wish we have a call center, and what better way to be able to maybe share that, especially if you're on the same system, or even if not, just to be able to have maybe from 6 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, which typically on your own it would be tough to afford, right? It's a 15-hour operation, but if you're sharing that with multiple credit unions, perhaps it's more feasible. And also to maintain your cost of operations, because as we grow, unfortunately, the cost of operation goes along with it, but perhaps if you are collaborating or sharing with other credit unions, you can maintain that cost relatively low as you grow your credit union, and therefore your ratio, your expense ratio will be much better for you. So an example of that is additional staff training, or maybe additional branches because you're branching out. What I mean by staff training is you have your typical normal staff training, but perhaps if you were to bring an expert, that's going to cost thousands of dollars. It would be a lot less expensive for you to do that if you combine your resources. An example that we did is we brought in Brett Christensen, which is a lending expert per se, and he charges an X amount of dollars. Well, my little credit union can't afford for him to come out. But we brought in 14 different credit unions. There were over 80 people that attended, and then the cost per credit union significantly reduced. And for him, it was fine because he knew that was the only way these small credit unions can do it, right? Why not just merge? Why do we even try to bother to collaborate or to share resources with other credit unions? Well, you can do that if you want, but you can argue the same thing with everything else in life, right? You all eventually pass away, why would we even have to live our life through the time? Well, that's the difference, right? You want to try to beat the drum while you're here. You want to try to do the best you can for your members. So it should definitely be considered if you think you're no longer providing the financial services that your members need. I think that's number one. If we can't provide it to them, then perhaps we need to start looking into that. But definitely that should be the effort. The effort should be trying to afford to provide these things. Like I said, call center if that's something that you think there's a big need, but try to do that at a less expensive way and combine resources with your fellow credit union. But it should be the final option, in my opinion, and also be proactively addressed. Meaning, I call it a survival plan. I think it's a good idea that we have a plan that has action plans that you can pull these triggers. It depends on your financial condition. If the trend of your financial condition is not positive and you try to forecast, if really it gets to a point where it's no longer going to make sense for you, I think it makes sense for you to really consider it if it gets to that point. I think you owe it to your membership, and I think you owe it to the credit union itself, right? I'm not here to suggest mergers. All I'm saying is this is the reality. That was my disclaimer from the very beginning. I think it's important that we look that is a threat that we probably should avoid, but we need to do what we can to try to make sure that we can continue to provide the services that our members need. What about collaborating with larger credit unions? I'm always asked about this. I'm always other people that are coming into our group that wants to collaborate. They first wanted to only have our group, the SEC way, the Southern California Credit Union Alliance. They said, no, we have to have an asset limitation. And we came up with 140 million. After the first meeting, we took that off. We said, wait a minute, why wouldn't we collaborate with the large credit unions? They may have the excess capacity. They're very efficient, so they usually don't. But they may make room just to try to help another credit union. Not all large credit unions, in fact, most that I know are not out there to merge small credit unions. In fact, some of our asset size, it's not even enough for a large credit union to bother to merge you. So I wouldn't be concerned about that. I understand that there might be some that does that, but for the most part, I don't see that. A good example is that Schools First, they even started a credit union. It's called the La Comunidad Latina, and Dennis did say I'm not Spanish, so I didn't say that right, but you understand what I said. La Comunidad Latina is a credit union they helped get started, and Schools First really helped them out. The other one, Westcom, and Schools First is over 10 billion, Westcom is over 3 billion. They helped started Employment Development Credit Union, and there were several credit unions that actually put deposits into that credit union and not earn any dividend to help this credit union get started. This credit union is one of the only newly chartered credit union in Southern California, and they've been in business for over 5 years now. So I wouldn't be too afraid to get all the credit unions involved, right? And then most large credit unions, like I said, they don't need to have to merge all of us or some of our small credit unions. They don't even want to do that. They want to keep the small credit unions. So I think it's important. So now I'm going to shift to talking about the shared credit union CEO. So as Dennis said, I manage 3 credit unions, and I've been doing it for about 12 years. And so I'm going to kind of go through these slides to just give you a little bit of background. And I also have a lot of frequently asked questions that I'm going to go through, and hopefully that answers the questions that you may have. So first, I started my career at the credit union when I was 10 in 1990, or 9 years old, I think. Trevor is looking at me. Okay. And the credit union was about 12 million, and then I became CEO of Lecomto, not Lick My Toe, I'm sorry. But, we had to change the name because of that. It stood for Little Company of Marion Torrance, and that was in 1996. I attended the CUNY school, as Dennis mentioned, and then right after that, I really made a decision that credit union was going to be my career. And so what happened, how it really started, is Copley Credit Union, which is about half a mile away from my credit union from Lecomto. The CEO was actually had health problems. He had a heart problem, and every so often he's unable to go to work. So he would call my credit union, and we would go there and help him. To the point that sometimes he can't even make his board meetings, that I would actually run his board meetings. So we did this for a few months, and unfortunately, he eventually passed away. So I ended up being appointed as the new CEO of Copley because I was already doing it for a few months. So both boards felt like, well, it didn't really disrupt our businesses. In fact, it seemed like it complemented it. So they were okay with it, and that's how it started. But quickly, Copley decided that it was best to just merge with Calcom or Lecomto at the time. So when I said I'm not opposed to mergers, I've done 6 mergers, and none of which that I came to them and asked them to merge with me. They all came to us. I've had a couple of them that I've actually said, no, you know what, we're not really a good fit. You're a dairy credit union, I'm a healthcare credit union. Let me set you up with the dairy credit union that I think makes more sense. Because I'm not going to be able to serve that membership well, unlike this other credit union. So anyway, and then I became a CEO of City of Downey, and how that happened was the CEO left of that credit union, and the vice president that was left needed help on the financial side. She was more of a front office operational person, really good at that, but she had troubles when it comes to the finance. Well, you can't really operate a credit union without both, right? So I was helping her out on that, and then the chairman asked me, could you help us with the process of hiring the new CEO? I said, okay, that's kind of weird, but I said, okay, well, give me the resumes without the names. Although it was easy for me to figure out who it was when I saw the background of it. But nonetheless, on that board meeting, I made my recommendation. I said, I think, John Doe here or Jane Doe here would be your best candidate in my opinion. I gave them the first 2 that I think should be considered for the position. As I'm driving home, he calls me on my cell phone. Back then it was okay to drive and be on the phone at the same time. So he said, well, John, we really are having a hard time with this. We feel that you know, since you've been helping the credit union, maybe you should give up your credit union and just work with us. I said, I can't do that. You know, I'm really committed to my credit union. And he said, well, what about continuing to do the same thing? Well, remember, Copley had already merged to Lecanto, so I was back to one. It was around that same time. So I said, well, I told him, well, I was doing the 2 credit unions simultaneously, and I guess I've been doing yours. Let me put a plan together and I'll get back to you in the morning. So I didn't sleep. I actually stayed up all night, developed a plan. I waited until 6 in the morning and I called my second in command person and I said, hey Johnny, I said, okay, we have this opportunity. I know we've been doing this, we've been helping this credit union, but now they want it to be more of a formal setup similar to Copley. And I said, are you in? That's all I asked, and he said, of course I'm in. I put down the phone, I went to sleep, and then I called the chairman as soon as I woke up in the afternoon, and I said, all right, we're in. And so that was the origination of the multiple credit unions. And then lo and behold, in 2004, my mentor, the CEO of Mattel, where I started 14 years later, he was leaving the credit union, and he asked me to take on that credit union. He's always thought that should be my credit union. But at the time, like I said, I was so committed to my credit union, I just told the board, you know what, I'm doing this 2 credit unions simultaneously. Why don't we do this? Let's give it about 4 to 6 months. Let's try to see if we can do the 3 credit unions together. If it fails, no hard feelings, we tried it, and at least I still have 2 jobs. But you know, if it doesn't fail, I guess we can continue on. Well, again, that was since 2004. So in 2005 is our biggest year. I say our biggest year only because of all the things that we did in 1 year. But after going through that in 1 year, we felt that, you know, if we can handle that, we can handle quite a few things. Remember, at this point, we were already managing, and I say we because I really don't feel that it's just me. I may be the shared CEO, and we have a shared IT, a risk management guy, but the rest of my staff and my team, they kind of work all together. So I don't feel like it's me that's doing it. I may be the guy with the biggest pom-pom as a cheerleader for this whole thing, but everybody is really doing it together. So in 2005, we had an opportunity for these couple credit unions that want to merge with us. And that's when we felt that the Lecanto doesn't make sense anymore because it was so focused on that little company of Mary Torrance Hospital. We had to change it to a more generic name, and we're not very creative, so we just came up with Calcom. We didn't have the $1 million budget to come up with a name. And since I was always in traffic on the 91 freeway, a lot of the planning session took place on that freeway. So it didn't cost but a fast track expense to come up with that name. And we also relocated our office. And as Dennis mentioned, I went to Q school. I felt like I needed more background or more studies if I'm going to continue on being in this industry. So it was a fun time. For those that have attended the CEO Institute, it's a great educational plan for credit union executives. And then the 2008, during that time, it was the financial crisis. And that's all I did was I called friends of mine, just like what you guys are doing here, and I said, I don't know about you, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with my credit union. Maybe we can all talk and to see how we're going to handle this thing. And that was in December of 2008, and that's how we formed the SEC Way, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. In 2009, we merged Care Connections, and then ITTGC, and then lastly, City of Downey finally decided that they should merge. Now let me talk to you about that. That was my other credit union, remember? So if you notice, it was 7 million in assets, 900 members. It was 7 million in assets, 900 members. It actually grew to 13 million. I almost doubled that. I was so happy. We even opened up a branch outside the City Hall because the credit union was operating on the 2nd floor of the City Hall. And I said, we're going to grow this credit union. We can't grow this on the 2nd floor of the City Hall. People are not going to come up here and do this. So we opened up a branch outside the City Hall, and that's when we grew all the way to 13 million. Well, and then all of a sudden the crisis came. And then it made it difficult for that credit union. And then the trend of our financials didn't look good. So we tried to forecast, it was, oh, this is really looking grim. It's really looking tough for us. And so, like I said earlier, then that's when I felt like it was really important for us to create a plan. And I call it survival plan, so that the NCUA won't look at it as capital restoration plan or NWRP, net worth restoration. I didn't want them to put me on that box. I called it whatever I want to call it. It's a couple pages, but it has these levers that you pull, right? These triggers that you pull depending on your financial condition. One of the things of which, actually one of the first things that need to be done is if we already think we might be merging in the next few years, is we actually try to identify the merger partners that we have. Of course, one of them I was pitching was my own credit union, but really we considered all the credit unions in that community, in the city of Downey. So I met with the CEOs of those, and then we actually presented the information for the merger packet to our board. But luckily for us, the board decided to merge with us. But we were prepared for them to merge with any of those other credit unions. But I felt that at least we did the homework for that credit union. And then last year, so in 2013, and then I had a baby, so I got a break time there. And then in 2014, the Japanese American Community Credit Union in our neighborhood, Nikkei, asked me to be an interim CEO. Fortunately, the credit union's been negative earnings for 4 years in a row. And they figured I was crazy enough to take on this job. So 4 days going into the credit union, and it's the first time I've ever worked for a state credit union. So the DBO and NCUA came into the credit union and handed me a gift. It was an LUA. Said, welcome to Nikkei. Okay. I said, all right, well, you know, one thing I didn't share with you is that when I started at Lecompto, I was embedded on my job. You know, I was so young, I got that job, and it wasn't until 3 years later I finally came out of that credit union, and I finally attended to one of these things, and I walk up to this table, and I said, hi, I'm John Hernandez, I'm introducing myself. This one lady said, oh yeah, we know you. Said, we were just wondering how long it was going to take for you to get out of there, because that was the only reason some young guy like me got that job, because I was the only young, dumb, stupid person that would take it. Because when I first walked in there,